Good morning, everyone. Let me get myself organized. Welcome to another Thursday morning for the Healing Hour. My name is Sarah Fargo O'Brien. Sorry, something in my eye. Hello. My name is Sarah Fargo O'Brien, and I am your host for another episode of the Healing Hour. It is right chilly here in Virginia this morning, at least it was. And my office is a cool 63 degrees. So I have a sweatshirt on and my nice warm coffee that I already burned my tongue on. It's been a morning. I've been all over the place already. I had a medical appointment this morning. I have another one this afternoon. I have a couple appointments tomorrow. So the music this morning kind of felt like my morning, just a everywhere. I made it to my desk by 10:30. Just enough time for me to check my email and get organized to start the show. If you're here, let me know that you're here. My brain is like not on all the way. Good thing I have a slide deck for today. Yes, if you're here, let me know you're here. I'd love to give you a shout out. If you missed last week's show, I encourage you to go back and listen to it. I had Chasen Forehand, founder of the nonprofit HR4U and Transformation Kitchen that I have the privilege of working with and being the director of student wellness for. It was a great conversation about healing and paying it forward and what's helped him over the years and that how he's been able to give it back a lot with this nonprofit that he's doing and things that he's learned along the way in his own healing journey. So really good conversation with my good buddy. Lots of good stuff. He has his own podcast, the Time to Change podcast, which is a friend of the Healing Hour podcast. So be sure to check his podcast out. I will be mentioning some more friends of the Healing Hour podcast at the end of this show to give you guys some ideas of some other things to check out, a little bit related to what I'm doing, but not exactly the same. If you want another podcast to check out, sorry, mouth really dry since I burned my tongue. If anybody's done that, you know how that feels. It's just like sandpaper. That's difficult for me because I already feel like I have dry mouth from talking all the time. Maybe I need to take my 3 deep breaths. Leanna's here. Maybe that'll get me organized. Good morning, Leanna. Happy to see you yet again for another episode of the Healing Hour. Leanna is here pretty much every week. I appreciate your steadfast attendance to my show. As I've said to you guys before, I'm kind of just a nobody that nobody knows over here in Richmond, Virginia. I'm not famous. I don't have a lot of money. I don't have a lot of influence. I'm not on the national stage so much, but I have a lot of experience in mental health. I have a lot of experience in trauma healing. I have a lot of experience in peopling. And I have a lot of experience in speaking and writing. So I try to impart my wisdom and my experience for you all out there in hopes that it can facilitate your own healing or help you show up better or support better somebody in your life that may be healing from something. That is why this is called the Healing Hour. And of course, I am a licensed clinical social worker here in Virginia, also in Maryland. I am a practicing licensed clinical social worker at my own private practice. I do psychotherapy with adults pretty much all day, every day when I'm not doing my other contracts. But yeah, my bread and butter is being a therapist. I've been a therapist for 15 years. You can find out more about my work and training and how to get in contact with me if you live in Virginia or Maryland for therapy. I just completed my DBT certification. So now I'm a certified clinical DBT provider along with some of my other certifications. So that's been pretty exciting. That was a lot of training to go through. You can learn all about me, all the services I offer, all my background at www.sarah O'BrienLCSW.com. That is Sarah, Sarah, O'Brien, OBRIEN, LCSW.com. Okay, I already said I was sort of all over the place today what I have going on. That's where I am at. My role as a faculty liaison at Cleveland State's social work program has been interesting and busy, complicated, a little stressful, a lot kind of going on there, coordinating things with my 18 to 20 students. So I have some of that going on today, but exciting news. Next Thursday is my birthday and there is no show. I am turning 40. I can't believe it. Maybe you can't either. And I am going to be doing what I love the most, which is traveling, going someplace new, doing it by myself. And I'm going someplace I've never been before that I really, really, really want to see. So I am going to Hawaii. I am leaving on Wednesday next week. There will be no show on my birthday, October the 9th, because I will be doing cool things in Hawaii. And that is a 6-hour time difference from here in Virginia, East Coast time, where I'm doing this show. So that would mean I would have to be up and doing the show at 5 a.m. Hawaii time. And that just ain't gonna happen. Even if I'm up at 5 a.m., I am not going to be on camera. So no show next week. You guys will have to watch one of the past shows, and there are so many good ones. Check out the neuroscience of trauma, the neuroscience of anxiety, generational trauma, and epigenetics. Those are all great episodes. You can check out any of my episodes with guests. Those are also really good episodes. Okay. And then at the end, I will share what is coming and who is coming up on the Healing Hour. You guys are going to be stoked. I got some cool people coming on. Okay, let's take 3 deep breaths, and then I will get into the slide deck and talk about my healing journey and how becoming an entrepreneur has facilitated my ability to heal. So you guys know, especially if you've been following my posts in September, and if you're in the Integrate app, shout out to Integrate. They had a lot of breath work items in our content for September. We have a few more of those, along with some other good habits and skills based in DBT in the Integrate app in October. So go check those out. I have put some practices and some daily signals on the app. So you can get me there as well in little short 1-2 minute bites. I know you're probably like, how the hell, Sarah, do you do 1 to 2 minute bites? It's taken work. I've learned from the best. Julie Johnson is the best at getting right down to brass tacks. And so, yes, there's some short practices on there that I am leading. So feel free to check that out. And if you want to right now, take your deep breaths with me in through your nose, out through your mouth. Again, in and exhale. One more time. I'm currently watching my little dog, my little 10-pound miniature dachshund. My pups are up here with me today. They usually are on Thursdays, and you guys have no idea because they're actually really quiet, and I'm shocked that they don't make any noise up here when I'm doing this live. But I'm watching my little dog try to root and roll and get himself under a blanket because it's freezing up here. It's funny because just trying to get that little blanket over him. I can't get up and help him because I'm live on this show with you guys. All right, let's get my slide deck up here. Enough about that and me and my personal life. Literally doesn't matter. I am going to be talking a little bit more about that today, though. I'm going to be talking about how entrepreneurship has been healing. This is a new topic series that I'm doing all in October. I'm going to have other guests on talking about this topic as well, and how becoming an entrepreneur or entrepreneurship has been healing for them. I'm going to let you know who that is at the end of the show. If any of you are here, shout out to me. Hello, LinkedIn user. Not sure who you are. Not sure why it doesn't have your name, but I am happy that you were here. Let's get going. How it has helped me heal. How being an entrepreneur has helped me heal. Let's talk about it. My burnout in social work jobs led to becoming a practice owner. And then again, trauma healing was possible because of entrepreneurship. So in two very distinct ways have I seen me having my own business, working for myself, having my own schedule and things, being able to manage my workload, with my capacity and all of that, and how that has actually facilitated me to step into some healing or healing work that I need to do. So we're going to be talking about my early career, when I experienced burnouts, how I had to do more before less, even though I was burnt out, and when I got to healing again. I hope this is interesting for you guys. Not sure at all, because this is just my own life of things. Okay, before I get into my early career, let me just say something about 15 years ago when I was in social work school. When I was in my Master's of Social Work program, I had a full course load, so 5 classes a semester, or 4 classes a semester, maybe 5. I can't remember if my field internship counted as a whole class or not. So either 4 or 5 like lecture classes that I would attend that had things like huge papers, projects, and tests, right? And then I also had internships, or what we called field placement or field practicum, in medical social work field. And my first year, I was required to do 14 hours a week, and I did that at an EAP. In my second year, I was required to do 21 hours a week. This is free labor, y'all. 21 hours a week, in addition to a full graduate course load, my second year. And those were challenging in their own ways, especially the second year. My second year internship was more challenging. I was assigned to a DBT team at an area community services board. I worked with adults. I did case management. I helped facilitate DBT skills groups and their family education group. I saw individuals for one-to-one counseling. I did a lot of things. Also during that time, my mom was sick with Parkinson's disease, and she died actually at the very start of my second year of graduate school, actually on October 1st. That was yesterday. So as of yesterday, my mom has been dead and gone for 16 years. And she died in October when I had just started my second year internship. So pretty much that whole year was a struggle for me. And it would have been real nice to not be tied to those hours. And some of that is my own issue and my own perfectionism and achievement. But I didn't take off more than like 2 days from classes when my mom died. And that was for the wake and for the funeral. And then I went right back to what I was doing because I didn't want to have to make it up later. That's one of the ways that social work programs start new providers off in what I believe is doing things that are not healthy and overworking and not honoring capacity. Required to get the hours by the time I graduate. I get it. Could have made them up, but when I was doing a bunch of coursework, getting it done by graduation day, there needs to be a lot more flexibility with human service providers, especially in the social work field. That is my humble and honest opinion. I have been in this field for a long time. I think social work internship needs to change. I think they need to be paid. I think they need to be less time so that there's better balance with things. And there needs to be a little bit more flexibility as well with all the jobs I'm going to talk about. So that's where I started my career. Thought all that was normal at the time. It was normal for all of the people I went to school with. And quite honestly, I don't know if it's any different in Virginia. It sounds like it's a little bit different at Cleveland State, where I'm working now. Okay, finally, I'm not burning myself on my coffee. But I feel like that just sets us up in this career to expect to be overworked, underpaid, taken advantage of, and doing all the shit grunt work for an entire career. And I'm not okay with that. And it hasn't been good for me. And today I'm going to explain why. So those were my internships. Now let's talk about my early career. As soon as I finished graduate school, I moved to California. I'm not going to get into why, but ultimately it was a decision that I made at the time. And I did all of my education, internship, and all of my networking connecting in Virginia. So being fresh out of graduate school and moving to California was challenging all in and of itself, as well as understanding how social work was going to work out in California. They have different requirements and different expectations than in Virginia. And one of those was applying for what's called an associate social work license. That's once you finish school, but before you have done your supervised paid work to then sit for the licensing exam. And California's licensing exam is also very different than Virginia's licensing exam and licensing requirements. And there is not reciprocity between the two states. So I had to look into doing all of that and then sort of had to find a job there. That was very challenging. I didn't know anybody. I hadn't made any connections. I didn't go to school there, didn't have a professor there. So this was back in 2010, y'all. Oof. Yeah, 2010. And I went old school. I looked up places online. I called who I could call. But I really drove around and knocked on doors of the places that I found online, more or less, and said, hey, I can't see anywhere online where you're hiring for a new social worker, but I am a new social worker looking for a job. So here's my resume. And if you have anything open up, please give me a call. I did that a lot. I did that for several weeks. That is how I got a job in California. When I first got there, I had dropped off my resume and chatted with some folks at a place called El Hogar, which is the house in Spanish. It was called El Hogar. And they called me when they had a position open up. And that is how I started working there. Things work different in other states. For people in Virginia, are probably very well versed in a community services board or public mental health agency. We have them for pretty much every county or locale here in Virginia. So there's Henrico CSB, Hanover CSB, Chesterfield CSB. There's RBHA in Richmond City. There's Region 10 in the Charlottesville area. Those are all community services boards that provide public and usually free or very low cost services to folks in the community that need it, especially for mental health care. And so I was basically working at a place kind of like that for California, except they're not funded and run in the same type of way. So it was more of a private agency that functions the same. And I was very excited to have my first job. I was very excited to make $37,000 a year. And have health insurance benefit. This is in 2010, y'all, in California. That is how much I made. Yes. So that's another thing. With a master's degree, that's how much I was making. 2 years of internships. So 2 years of clinical practice. Yeah, that's part of the rub. I didn't work here very long. My life kind of imploded in California. Again, not going to get into it. You can watch one of my other podcast episodes or speaking engagements where I talk more about what happened there. But in terms of the job, so I only worked there like about 2 weeks before I ended up leaving California altogether and coming back to Virginia. But what was happening there is like super micromanaged. I had to account for pretty much every minute of the day, including like the amount of time to walk to the chart room to pick up a client chart and bring it back. It was a very interesting system. So that was that. It was my first job in social work out of graduate school, and I worked there 2 weeks, and then I moved back to Virginia, and then I had another 3-month gap on my resume, and after I had 3-4 month gap on my resume after I graduated. So that was fun to explain when I moved back to Virginia. Actually, just later in 2010, I was not there very long. Again, I am applying. I get hired at RBHA. That's Community Services Board for Richmond City. I had actually applied for one job and they pulled me in for an interview. And it was during the interview that I realized they were interviewing me for a different job than the one I applied for. Again, some of these things are what leads to burnout and a lot of the wear and tear in addition to the clinical work on social workers. So I applied for a case management job and I got a mental health skill building job, which honestly I was like super overqualified for with a master's degree. It's something that at the time, to be a qualified mental health professional, QMHP, you needed a bachelor's degree. Now they've reduced the requirements even more, that you only need either an associate's degree or less to be a QMHP, a qualified mental health professional. And so that was interesting, and I wasn't really sure what to make of it, but I didn't know anything about mental health skill building at the time. And I learned on the job, basically. I wasn't taught very, very much. I was said, go shadow your teammates, kind of figure out what you're doing. That's not good supervision, really, when you start a job, but I did learn from my coworkers what I needed to do. At this job, I needed supervision for licensure. So having more a specific clinical supervisor that monitors my 2,000 hours of work and gives me at least 100 hours of one-to-one supervision before I can apply for my licensing exam. And it was not offered at RBHA at the time. Okay, so we're still back in like 2010, 2011, guys. And at RBHA, I was making $36,000 a year. So I took a pay cut to come back to Virginia. And supervision for licensure was not included. It could have been included, but I was going to have to sign a 5-year post-licensure contract, which I wasn't willing to do. I was already not feeling that great about my time there. I definitely didn't want to commit to 5 more years. So I had to pay out of pocket with my very limited funds for my supervision for licensure, which cost me about $250 a month. And when you're making $36,000 a year and you live by yourself and you pay $1,000 in rent, it's like no money, guys. I had like no money in the first part of my career, even though I had a master's degree. So that's part of what's difficult. Like, can't pay student loans, can't get ahead. You could barely pay the bills. So the job started off kind of hard, got in the swing, and then about 2.5 years into the job, they made a bunch of changes. I went from working 5 8, so normal, like 5 days a week, 8-hour a day work schedule, to 4 10s. This came on abruptly. This wasn't explained well, except they wanted more coverage. They were including a rotating weekend where there were only 6 of us on my team. So every 6th weekend, you were going to have to work 10 hours on Saturday, 10 hours on Sunday. There was no pay differential. There was no explanation about safety. There is no explanation about what we do if we need a supervisor, because the building is closed on the weekends and after 5 o'clock. So us having to work past that did not make sense because there's nobody there. Even though we did most of our work in the field, there was still no support. There's a lot of problems with it. Me and my team sat down and collected all of the problems that we had with it, presented it to our boss at our next meeting. Of course, you guys can imagine, even back then, I was the spokesperson. Even though we all came up with concerns together, I voiced them at our meeting, and my boss was absolutely horrible to me. I'm crying in this meeting. My team is not backing me up. I am sitting there just like dumbfounded and upset and getting yelled at. And I was like, I got to find a new job after this. So that was a shitty experience. In the midst of that, I was like, I need to figure something out, move up, whatever. So I became the like a team lead basically. So I did all the intake assessments for our services. They were shooting to give me like a 10% raise, and the only thing my supervisor could negotiate was 3%. I was very near done with my supervision for licensure and then being able to sit for my licensing exam, but I didn't have a title at RBHA that would allow me to receive the automatic raise that clinical social workers or clinical providers were going to get once they got licensed. And I advocated for my title to be shifted since I was running a group and doing all the intake assessments in addition to all the other work, and I was denied. So if I would have stayed at RBHA and got licensed, I would have been making $0 more, even though it was written in their handbook that that would be sort of an automatic thing. I was very frustrated. I had been there 3 years. I had adjusted to this job change that you paid us no differential for. And then you're telling me like there's nothing that you can do to help me once I put all this work and paid all this money for my supervision for licensure. So I worked on an exit strategy and finding a new job. I did find a new job as an outpatient clinician at one of the county at Hanover CSB so outside of the Richmond City area, just a county north of the city. I really thought this would be better. This was going to be more office-based, salary still low. So in 3 years at RBHA, I managed to go from $36,000 to $39,000 a year. So this is postmaster's degree. This is 3 years of paid work experience, and this is now licensed. I'm only making $39,000 at RBHA. And then I moved to make just a bit more, $46,000 a year at Hanover CSB, which for me was a good jump at the time because I'm getting like a 1% raise every year prior to that. But the salary is still incredibly low for being a licensed clinical social worker, having 3 years of paid experience, 2 years of unpaid experience, right? And again, this is like something that we're told we just have to accept in the field. And I think it needs to shift because it does not, it's not a good system for human service providers. It's not good for us to work that way and work for that low of a salary when it is a high skill, high stress, high capacity taking job. This job also included on-call crisis for the entire county on a rotating on-call overnight shift every 6 weeks. And let me be clear, I was a daytime worker who then once every 6 weeks had to stay up all night and do TDO assessments. It sucked. My caseload was really high. By the time I was ending there, they were adding more services. And as a matter of fact, 3 new services that adult outpatient clinicians were going to have to take over in addition to everything else they were doing. And then there was sort of a growth path here, which is what I had asked about, but it was really difficult to move from a Clin 1 to a Clin 2 or for Clin 2 to Clin 3 for not that much more once you did all that. My supervision at this place was poor. There were poor leadership. There were constant safety and ethical issues. I was having to advocate for my own safety and ethical issues that were happening. There were lots of changes that were upcoming. They were going to move to same-day access, meaning if somebody walks in for an intake, then they might get assigned your caseload that day and you have to see them. And centralized scheduling, meaning I wasn't going to have control over my schedule anymore. A clock in, clock out system. Again, I had been in the professional working world for 6 years with a graduate degree and a license in my field, clocking in and clocking out. I was not interested in doing. And there was a massive negative impact on my health and on my sleep and on my mental health from doing on-call shifts with like little to no support. So I nearly burned out at RBHA, and what led to it is I started off with a really good supervisor, and then she got promoted and somebody else came in who was working in the agency but had no supervision experience, had never supervised anybody, and had no idea what kind of training she did or didn't get because she was not a good supervisor. So there was poor leadership there. I told you the change in the schedule from the 5/8s to the 4/10s was really bad. It was really bad for my dog at the time. It was just me and just her. And moving to 4/10s meant I was really gone like almost 12 hours a day once you build in a lunch break and commuting. And she started to eat my carpet. And so that was really stressful. And I told you guys how much money I made. So I didn't have money for a dog sitter, for a dog walker. And it was just not going to be a long-term solution for me and my family member, my pet, my baby. So that change in schedule was really impactful. There was no flexibility, like figuring out like if you could not work your weekend shift, you had to get one of your 5 coworkers to cover it. Like it was all really difficult. The no pay differential for working the weekends, lack of adequate support, and there's no room for growth. Working in Hanover CSB, what led to my burnout there was absolutely poor leadership pretty much all the way up the chain. I was 100% overworked, underpaid, and undervalued. Constant safety and ethical issues that I'm having to advocate. There is no flexibility in my schedule there either. And in fact, the office that I was at required me to do 3 coverage shifts there. So one morning and 2 afternoons of half the day. So 3 4-hour blocks in the week, I'm required to be in my office building and sitting there because I'm on coverage there. So that's like if I have a doctor's appointment that's that day, not only do I have to get like my work covered, I have to get the office coverage covered. There's just so much. And there was also, even though there's room for growth, there really wasn't room for growth. Like moving up to Clint 2 didn't really do anything. The only place to go is a supervisor. Let me tell you how much I did not want to do that. So it was feeling frustrating. It was like, I'm going to be at the CSB doing clinical work for the next 40 years until I graduate, unless I figure out something else to do. It was not working for me. I was very dissatisfied. I was talking about it with my supervisor. Nothing was really getting done. So I started to plan, what am I going to do? I've been in the field for 7, 8 years now by this point, like maybe closer to 9 if you add in my 2 years of internships and experience. And so it's like, what am I going to do? I started job searching. I'm looking for other jobs in the area. I looked at hospital social work jobs. It's like something different. I interviewed at a group practice, like a group private practice. Maybe I could just join there and that would be better, or I'm going to start my own practice. How am I going to do that? I'm working this job full time. And then I was so burned out here that it was me thinking I might just have to change careers. And how do you change careers after you've gone through 6 years of higher education for this career and almost 9 years of practice in this career and a license in this career to just change careers? Like all of it felt extremely overwhelming, but I was really burnt out and tired of working at a place where they didn't value me. They were very condescending. They would, in a dime, put me in an unsafe situation and then blame me if it went bad. So had to do something different for my own mental health. So I'm overworked, undervalued, underpaid, overwhelmed, stressed, and have to build a practice on the side. Again, did not have enough money to leave my full-time employment to start my practice and build it up. So I'm full-time at the CSB. I'm part-time at my own practice, Thrive and Shine Counseling. I reserved one day where I'm not doing any work, and that was Sunday. And that was for like grocery shopping, laundry, I don't know, trying to be a person in any other way. I was super tired, had like no social life. I had low patience and there's no balance. I basically just had to work all the time because I had no flexibility, more or less, at my CSB job. And so after I'm done at 5:00 there and on Friday and on Saturday, I see clients at my private practice. It was a lot. I did that for almost a year. It was not fun. I was working a lot, and I was almost quitting my full-time job constantly. I was so dissatisfied and so frustrated for my whole last year there. There were many a times I was like, I'm just going to get up and walk out today. This place is so bad. I'm just going to get up and quit today. And, my spouse would talk me off the ledge and say, okay, you have a plan, you're working toward it. Let's not do that. We need your income, da, 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 da. So I was trying to advocate for what I needed. I had to advocate a lot because I was struggling so much in the end, and just all the things they wanted me to do were just not within my capacity. And so then after a while of that, I started to work smarter, not harder. I only worked I worked a 12-hour shift every Wednesday for 3 years at this job to get off at 1:30 p.m. on Fridays. So a whole 3.5 hours early, I guess. But as a result of that, I would have that afternoon to see clients at my private practice. And after a while, I just started calling in on Fridays and scheduling a full day at my private practice so I could build up and leave faster. So would they have wanted me to do that? Probably not. Were they giving me enough of my own time to take care of myself? Absolutely not. Did I have sick time to use? Sure did. So started calling in every Friday, and doing other things. And that was starting to balance just a wee bit. So like I said, I had to do both jobs for like 9 months or more. I had to build up my caseload. I had to really not talk about it at my agency. I was being hushed at work with all my dissatisfaction, having closed-door meetings with my supervisor telling me I can't complain about my job to my coworkers at lunch. I write all about it in the book, Bullied: How I Got By. Feel free to pick up that book and check out my story about working at this place and how I was bullied and how leadership was so poor and took advantage of social workers, boots on the ground individuals at this job. Like, it was just ridiculous. So I resigned. I got out of my last couple of on-call shifts. One, I called in sick. When I got a doctor's note, it was wreaking havoc on my sleep, my stress, my body. And even though I talked to my supervisor about it, it was basically like, you have to do this. This is part of your job. So unless you get a doctor's note. So I resigned from there, took the leap, started my private practice. It's not like the stress went away. There's still more before less because now I'm an entrepreneur for the first time. I really still only had a small caseload because there's only so much you can build working 2.5 days a week, when I'm working 4.5 days a week at the other place. So I'm trying to get in the groove, trying to build up my private practice. And 2 months into when I quit my full-time job, and now I'm full-time in my private practice, although I don't have a full-time caseload yet, my spouse had relapsed on drugs and went to rehab. So he had to take 5 weeks with no pay and was gone for 5 weeks. And I have a limited caseload at my brand new practice. So not only am I really concerned about finances, but I'm also personally stressed. There's a lot happening in my life. I would have liked to have also taken time off to take care of myself and deal with the blow, the betrayal from the amount of time he was using drugs and lying to me about it, and then all the stuff that happened with getting him to rehab. But I did not have a choice but to work and see clients. So again, this is still more before less, when really my body, mind, and nervous system needed something else to heal. But I did not have a choice because I needed to work. So I was suppressing a lot of my trauma reactions, especially the betrayal and relational trauma and attachment wounds that I already had from my childhood trauma. Really, really triggered when my spouse went to rehab. And I really just had to push it away. I did not have time to deal with it because I had to work, and my work is being a therapist. And so I had a lot of financial worry, even though I technically had more free time because my caseload wasn't that big. I had more responsibility for running a business, and I had lots of stress and little self-care because I'm trying to manage everything at my house as well while my spouse is gone in the summer. So this is like yard work, housework, taking care of my dogs, running my practice, seeing my clients, taking care of myself, didn't have help. It was me while he was gone, and we had no money coming in unless I was working. So very difficult, not facilitating my healing, being a social worker pretty much from graduate school through the first 9 or 10 years were like really hard on my mental health and my physical health, in addition to the other things that I had going on. And the way that those jobs are designed, they just do not take care of the people that are doing the work. So I have to start like setting more boundaries. I built up a big caseload, even though I still have financial worry. It's feeling better. I'm working into the evenings because I'm finding that's when I can fill slots. But all I have is client work and like doing the business stuff. I kind of figured out along the way, and it wasn't too bad. And like things got better with my spouse and I once I got back from rehab for a little bit. That took some time, but it did start to get better. So then after my first full year in private practice, so really I started my practice in May of 2016. So through all of 27, and I quit my full-time job in January of 2017. So January 2017 to January 2018, a lot. Spouse went to rehab, trying to manage all these things. After my first full year, I kind of really got in the swing. I got a good schedule that was like working for me with clients during hours that worked for me. You guys have probably heard me say a lot. I'm not a morning person. So being able to start at like 10:30 or 11 meant that I could like get up, walk my dog, go to the gym, take a shower, make my breakfast, all without having to be rushed and get somewhere by 8 or 8:30 in the morning. So that really was helpful and helped me make more time for self-care, like being able to walk my dog in the morning, like being able to get to the gym before work instead of after work when I'm not motivated at all. And so, so for years, like 2, 3, and 4 in my private practice were pretty good, onward after the first year. It becomes easier. I get in the groove. I have way less interpersonal stress than when I worked at agency jobs and not having to deal with shitty supervisors. I did struggle with boundaries with clients. It gets really difficult when you're trying to charge for late cancellations, no shows. You want to be accommodating, but at the same time, this is your livelihood. It took me a few years to like really feel more comfortable with that, but I'm still working less hours than I did at either agency job. That's for sure. And I continued to work less than I did at my agency jobs, less hours a week. And now I was making more money and I've had this nice flow. Yeah. Like I said, for the 2 or 3 years after the first year. So the first 4 years in my private practice, like getting into a flow. Like I said, my marriage improves. My family relationships are okay and decent. Things are kind of in a good groove for me. And then the pandemic hit. And I know it's not just me, but man, was it a lot. So if I go back here, right, I have less before more. Okay, it's good. I'm finally, personal stress is going down, work stress is going down, money is going up. Like I am feeling okay. This is like 10, what is this? This is almost like 14 years into my career though, guys. Like almost 14 years into my career, do I feel like I've been in a good groove for a little bit. Then the pandemic happens and it's more before less again. So I'm having to sort of sacrifice my self-care, my own time, my own mental health to show up for my clients, to keep my business, to manage and all the stress of the pandemic. So I went from being completely in person and having an in-person office where people in and around the Richmond area came and sat on my couch old school style for 4 years, to flipping my practice completely virtual overnight. And in fact, I was in like the Northern Virginia, Washington, D.C. area that weekend for Gottman training, literally March 13th, 14th, and 15th, when the pandemic is like raging and the U.S. is getting ready to shut down. I won't talk about how pissed I was that they weren't going to refund folks or cancel that training. So I'm there and talking with a colleague of mine who has a practice back here going, what do we do? What do we do? What do we do? So I'm in this training 8 hours a day for 3 days in a row, and trying to figure out how to, when I get back on Monday, flip everything to virtual since nobody's going in person anywhere. Talk about stress. There are massive payment issues, both with clients and with insurance companies as we moved into virtual because there were not good systems in place. And if you remember, everybody was losing their minds. And so that meant everybody needed a lot of therapy. I worked a lot. People were reaching out a lot. My caseload was the highest it ever was. I was seeing like 35 clients a week. Let me tell you, definitely the most. Up to that point, I was probably only seeing about 26 clients a week was like maybe the most. So I really jumped up there. And then in April, so at the end of April 2020, I had to have an emergency appendectomy. So yep, COVID times, April 26th. So this is like 6 weeks about into the shutdown of everything. And I have to go have emergency surgery. Because this is 6 weeks in the pandemic and I'm worried about things, I had my emergency surgery on Sunday and I saw clients again on Wednesday. I do not recommend. I am still learning about boundaries, but fear and financial worry drive a lot of my behavior, even when it's not good for my own health. And being a social worker meant that I have been basically undersalaried the entire time with no safety net, no family support. So also me paying for my own school and the whole thing. So finances were a major stressor and a major drive of me not taking good care of myself and not setting good boundaries around work. Because for me, the more I work, the more I make. And during the pandemic, if I was going to have to take a whole week off or several weeks off, it was not going to be good. And I was really concerned about that. I absolutely should not have. I mean, I could still barely get out of bed very often on Tuesday. And on Wednesday, I'm sitting in a recliner at my house with my computer doing client sessions. Literally for the rest of the week, I never took another day off. So again, working a lot more than is good for my health and mental health. Then if the pandemic's not enough, me and my spouse stupidly decided that we were going to build a house and signed a contract in like August, September of 2020. And our home build was happening all of like 2021. So we were moving in that time. I lost my best friend and my home. My dog Pearl died in February of 2021. And so there's been lots of stress in the year prior, and it was really difficult losing her. It still is. I miss her all the time. And as a result of us having to like move, sell our house, our new house wasn't finished. We moved in with my mother-in-law, very gracious, so appreciative, but stressful, guys. If anybody's ever done it, hard. Me and my spouse, my one dog, and our new puppy are living in like 2 rooms upstairs in my mother-in-law's house. And let's not forget, I am also working all day, every day from there from my computer. There were lots of issues with the contractors and the people building our house. And there were lots of people coming in my house for the first year after our new build, fixing a ton of shit they did not do well. I do not recommend building a house, folks. It is hands down the most stressful thing I have ever been through. There were lots of stressors and a lot of male contractors, subcontractors doing work in my house, and the way they treated me was god awful. After about 6 months of it, I was so uncomfortable. I started telling my spouse he has to stay home and deal with the people when they come to do work at the house, because I'm here by myself and I'm working upstairs, or I'm having to like come in and out, take a shower. They were so effing rude to me. It's unbelievable. And so there are lots of triggers to my trauma, lots of taking advantage, tons of my abject rage coming out all over the place. It was just too much. It was too much for my nervous system. My mentor, colleague, and friend Katie Kurtz says all the time, trauma really for us, and that reaction is too much, too soon, too fast. And that's exactly what all this was. It was too much, too soon, too fast. Too much stress, too much change, not enough support, not enough trust, like with me and my spouse. And so everything is breaking down. We didn't have enough of a foundation built up to withstand the amount of stress that was going to come from building a new house and then moving, and all the stressors that came after that we could not have anticipated, but really had an impact. My body started breaking down. I started having health issues and greater mental health issues, and less and less and less ability to manage my emotions and my trauma triggers. I got an extremely bad case of shingles in the summer of 2022. I had subsequent nerve pain for a year. Now I have nerve damage and subsequently irreversible change to my body and my function since having shingles, which I fully believe was brought on with stress. My OCD symptoms and my complex PTSD symptoms were raging. I had not been on medication in many, many years. And like, this was all just too much. I just could not function. So that led basically to, the end of 2022, many things in my life imploding, and me having to make a massive change. Like I have to change my life. This isn't working. So although I had started slowly scaling back my caseload from the 35 a week during the height of the pandemic, I was still probably hovering around 24 to 28 clients a week in 2021 and 2022. And I just really had to cut that back. So I did, and it did create some financial worry. I'll talk about that in a minute, but let me talk about what was good with it. In our new house build, there was specifically a place that we are making my home office. It's where I'm at right now. And I love it. I love this space. I feel good here. I can manage and control things in this space myself, like the temperature. I can wear whatever I want. Usually I'm professional on top and comfy pajamas on the bottom, that nobody can ever see. And so all of that it's very sunny here. My last office was in a basement. My last house was very dark. So I get the morning sun up here and it's bright, and my home office is actually really good for my nervous system. And it made it so that I could continue to work at all. Because if I had to work in an agency, or I had to work where I was interfacing with a lot of people other than my clients, there's no way I could have done it. I needed to scale back immensely to be able to care for myself. So I got better with boundaries all around, boundaries at work, boundaries with other people, took a deep dive into my trauma healing work with my therapist. And so things are okay. But in 2021, even though things were stressful with my build, and then we get to mid 2022 when I get shingles through the end of the year, and things are just horrible again. I have a brutal blow up with my family. With my brother in particular, and we've been kind of estranged since. I'm estranged from my dad. I don't talk to anybody in my family a lot because of toxicity and trauma. My marriage is now on the brink of divorce because in the last couple of years, we cannot withstand the stress that is caused, and neither one of us are coping well. My spouse started not being honest about things again. And so that betrayal is kicking up all my trauma triggers. I got hurt at my church, and it definitely re-triggered trauma in my relationships there. So that was not a safe place nor a community that showed up for me in the ways that I needed for as long as I needed there. I did not have enough time, energy, or space for myself and my needs. And so I had to cut back my caseload significantly, or what felt like significantly. What I really did was cut back by 4 sessions a week. But in that first year that I did that, it affected my income by $30,000 to $40,000. If that tells you anything about trading time for dollars as a mental health provider. This is because we're still undervalued and underpaid even by insurance contracts. And that is why we burn out, because we have to see enough people to pay the bills. So I always had financial worry. It was even worse with cutting back clients, but I just knew that I had to. And so I also cut back spending. I stopped going places. I stopped doing things that cost money. And all this really forced me to address the things with my physical health, something I didn't mention. A chunk of my hair fell out and I had a huge bald spot. It has thankfully been growing back, but just stuff I knew that was just too much stress in my body. And so this all led to the deep dive into my trauma healing, which I've mentioned. And I would not have been able to do that and take the time if I didn't have the flexibility and ability to cut back my caseload and just take less money and fix it in other parts of my life and really spend more time. I'm not having to meet a group practice expectation. I'm not having to meet an agency or company expectation. And so I really could do what I needed to do for me. And the only consequence was that I was going to make less money, but I had to be okay with that to be able to take care of myself. So not only did I need to like heal myself, my physical, my mental health, my trauma, my attachment wounds, trauma wounds, but I also needed to heal my work health. Like I said, I don't feel like they set up social workers, especially clinical providers, well, for the world. Like they're just expecting us to do this. They're very toxic environments. They're not looking at whole person care in terms of your service providers. And so I worked in very toxic and unhealthy workplaces because I think that's what they are for all social workers. So I left, and then when I was in private practice, I had a shared office that I was renting, and also a toxic person. I left that shared toxic office space when I moved, and that was really good for me in my work life. Cutting back my caseload for mental health was also good for my work life and capacity and actually being able to show up for my clients. I realized then that all day, everyday therapy is too much, and I need to start doing something else other than that. I need to start finding other ways that I can supplement my income so that I don't just have to take on more therapy clients to make enough to live, because I don't have capacity for that. So I started to pivot into other work and doing some other things, and my trauma healing of, my personal self and body, and then trauma healing of my work health and the way that I function there led to creating and designing. I started creating fun things in Canva. I made stickers. I printed them. I sell them at a local shop. I sell them online. I started writing blogs, contributing to reporters and journalists information. Started writing my own stuff. I joined some new organizations. I got on LinkedIn, which I'd never had before, started having a lot of those coffee chats. I was also getting screwed with a lot of new LinkedIn connections. So there's still me trying to navigate the work world, my trauma triggers, health, and people taking advantage of me. And all of that re-triggering my trauma, having to process all that in therapy. So although I need to branch out into something new, because being a therapist is taking a lot of my capacity and energy, and it's just, I'm not going to be able to see enough people to pay the bills forever. I need to start switching into something else, right? And then I have new stuff, like new trauma that's hitting me on top of it from new relationships that I thought were good, that weren't, from people I'd met and was working with via LinkedIn. But I also started speaking out about my truth. I started this podcast. I've been on a number of other panels and speaking events talking about CPTSD, mental health, my own mental health, attachment, childhood trauma, my own childhood trauma, right? And so that has been really helpful. I've started to speak out in book anthologies and sharing my story, like Bullied, How I Got By, and sharing how it was just an awful experience at the CSB, and I do not feel like they care at all about the people that work for them. I started really showing up authentically at work. So, and all the new connections I'm making in some of these new organizations, like being a part of Integrate Network, where, here 3 years later, I'm still talking about all those same people, right? Katie, Julie, Famia, and all the folks I've met through Integrate has been really good for allowing me to show up authentically, accepting me showing up authentically and not having to be perfect. And this was a real juxtaposition from life outside of work, where I was really showing up the way people were expecting, the way you're supposed to socially, doing right by people, doing what you're supposed to do in relationships, and not receiving it in return. And that just really wearing me out. And so having to show up authentically outside of work was more difficult, but I had the work experience to kind of pull from, and that was really helpful. And basically, yes, meeting all the folks that I have, trauma-informed professionals, are a game changer for me, for sure, in maintaining my work health. So healing is probably ongoing for most people, as it is for me. I don't feel like I have arrived, although I feel like 3 years later, I'm doing much better. And that is all because I've had the flexibility and to shift my work, and the ability to make less, make sacrifices other places, the ability to change the days that I work, the times that I work, cut back on the number of people that I see, give myself space to do new things, do creative things. None of my agency jobs would have like opened up doors for me to do that. That's been really good for healing for my nervous system. Really needed to get back into some creativity and creating some things. I love writing. That's been really good for me. And so although healing is ongoing, I really feel like, especially in the past 3 years, like what I can take and witnessing or reflecting on my own entrepreneurial journey, my work journey before that, who I've been, the things I've run into in life when I have felt best in my body and in my circumstances. And what I've gathered here recently in my ongoing healing is keeping these three things in the foreground. And these three things have been afforded to me as a result of my healing work. So that would be acceptance, authenticity, and alignment. So acceptance of myself, my circumstances, my shitty childhood, my unchanged family, my mistakes, my actions and reactions from my trauma, my spouse's actions and reactions from his trauma, learning to accept that as is. Authenticity in my new work relationships and social media marketing and posts. This includes posts in my on my personal pages too, just getting more authentic in those. In content creating and in writing and in content writing, just being authentic about my work experience, being true to what I know professionally and my expertise, not tiptoeing around it, not apologizing for it. Authenticity in my truth, authenticity with my flaws, authenticity around others, always a work in progress, because for me, inside relationships is where all my trauma gets triggered. And it's difficult for me. But with acceptance and authenticity, I found alignment with those new work relationship, with my values and how I spend my time, with my self-care and prioritizing my health and mental health, with my mental health symptoms and trauma healing, and with people outside of work, which I have question mark, XXX, because that's hard for me. I'm working on it. It's, 3 years, I've really taken a major step back where I don't do a lot of things socially because they're hard for me, as it triggers all my trauma. I'm slowly stepping back into some of those now. Of course, I've kept my best friend this whole time. And now that things are better with me and my spouse, he has been a good support and a good friend, and a place where I can be certainly authentic and make all the mistakes. He has seen me in the absolute worst places I have ever been in my life. And vice versa. I've probably seen him in some of the absolute worst places he's ever been in his life. And here we are. And man, it's been a bitch, guys. Almost getting divorced a bunch in the last 3 years, us being separated, me having further fallout and discord with my family, losing the community I had through my church via damaged and harmed relationships there, me getting harmed in relationships there, working by myself, for myself in a silo and not really being connected to other people. All of that really had a really negative wear and tear on my mental health and wellness. And being able to choose when I do things, what things I do, how much time I spend on this. Now I'm choosing even more like what work contracts do I take? What people do I work with? Do we align? That is helping me continue in my healing, because I'm getting linked with more and more people that are not re-traumatizing me. And I've gotten more and more healthy so that I'm not engaging in behaviors that accidentally re-traumatize me in relationships. So that's me and my entrepreneurial healing journey. How can I help you with yours? There are lots of freebies on my website, www.sarahobrienlcsw.com. Go check out Burnout, What You Need to Know, free ebook. If you are a licensed clinician, go to Private Practice to Start or Not guide and figure out if going into entrepreneurship is for you. I also have a trauma responses quick reference sheet. And I think that last one down there is a mindfulness activities ebook, even though you guys can't see it under my name. I also have digital products for purchase, particularly if you are feeling burnout at work. I encourage you to get my burnout recovery full kit. This includes all the contents of my self-care kit, my burnout awareness kit, my setting boundaries kit, and a bunch of extras. This will help you assess with the Oldenburg Burnout Inventory where you fall in burnout. And there are some actionable, tangible things that you can start doing to recover from burnout and build up your self-care and boundaries. And those things are all part of what helps you recover from burnout, avoid going into it again, and taking care of yourself. I also offer skills coaching, dedicated one-to-one skills coaching. Reach out to me for that. Nobody took me up on my September special. What a shame. You're really missing out on awesome coaching skills that I have, but now it's gone. Now the special is gone, and you just have to pay full price for the digital products instead of getting them for free. And then, of course, I do business to business consulting on these things. Shows for October. Today, you got my story on entrepreneurship and healing. Next week, no show. It's my birthday. Send me lovely messages. I might still read those. When I get back on the 16th, we have Trevor Martin joining me. This is one of my buddies that I've worked on an anthology with, actually the Bullied book that I mentioned here. And he is an awesome artist, comic book artist, coach, marketing, just a good dude, family man, dad, awesome guy. He's going to come on and talk about how becoming an entrepreneur has been healing for him and stepping into his truth. The week after that, I have another one of my lovely Integrate members, Nicole Lewis-Keeber, is going to be on. She trained me in Dare to Lead. She's also a licensed clinical social worker. She helps others heal their relationship with their business, which ultimately is healing all around. You are going to gain so much from the episode with her. And then at the end of the month, I have Nick Angi Galindo, I think I said your name right, also worked with me and Trevor on the Bullied book. I worked with Nick on another project. She writes just like I do. She's a publisher. She has had her own issues with mental health things and absolutely shitty workplaces. We align on a lot of those things. She recently just started her own publishing companies. She's going to come on and talk about that. And that's October. Stay tuned for November. I also have a whole month of guests lined up for November. Look at me go, y'all. The topic on that is new takes on old issues. That's all I'm going to say. The rest of it will come later. I'm a licensed psychotherapist, like I said, in Virginia and Maryland. I'm a multi-focused trauma-informed professional, a leadership strategist, coach, trainer, speaker. Some friends of the Healing Hour podcast. Let's Be Diverse podcast by Andrew Stout. He's usually in my shows. I don't know. He hasn't been here recently. Chime in the chat, which is such a shame. But check out his podcast. Chasing Forehand, of course, my guest last week, the Time to Change podcast. Nick Angi Galindo, who's going to be on at the end of October. She has the Person Behind the Pin podcast. She's hosted me on that. Julie Johnson, the founder of Integrate Network, has the Empathy by Design podcast. And my colleague, mentor, and friend, Katie Kurtz, has the A Trauma-Informed Future podcast. Go check those out for leadership, for writing, for design, for trauma-informed care. Some good podcasts. Thank you for joining me. As always, you are loved. You matter. You are worthy. I'm going to tell myself that. My birthday is hard for me every year. Relationally, things are hard. So I often feel very alone on my birthday. It's already creeping in on me this year. So I'm going to say to myself, Sarah, you are loved. You matter. You are worthy. Don't forget it. And the same goes for you. Don't forget it. Thank you so much for joining me on this very personal podcast, talking about my entrepreneurial journey and stepping out of burnout, stepping into healing, and in all the ways. No show next week. Go pick up one of the previous shows, watch that, tell me what you think about it, or send me a nice birthday message when you would normally be watching my show. And I will love either one of those things. You're going to catch me and my buddy Trevor back on October 16th at 11 a.m. on Thursday, East Coast time. I look forward to seeing you all then. Take care of yourselves first and always. Have a good day. Have a good weekend.